Commander Thelvan had served in the Valtrian Empire's defense fleet for 43 cycles. In all that time he'd seen plasma storms that could vaporize entire moons, gravitational anomalies that bent light itself, and space battles that lit up the void like artificial suns. But he'd never seen anything like this. The alarm started as a low hum on the bridge of his flagship, the Endless Vigilance. Then it became a shriek that made every crew member freeze at their stations. Thelvan's second in command, a grizzled veteran named Corsal, looked up from his console with an expression that resembled pure confusion. "Commander, we have a contact. Sector 9. But sir, the readings don't make sense." Thelvan moved to the main display, his three-fingered hands dancing across the holographic controls. The Empire sensor network was the most sophisticated technology in known space. It could track a ship the size of a personal transport from 3 star systems away. It could predict trajectories hours in advance. It could identify vessel types, weapon signatures, and power outputs with 99% accuracy. Right now, it was showing them something impossible. "Distance?" Thelvan asked, keeping his voice steady despite the ice forming in his chest. "That's the problem, sir. It was in Sector 9.3. Then it was in Sector 7.1. Now it's... Commander, that's a distance of 4 light hours. It crossed that space in 11 minutes. The bridge went dead silent. 4 light hours and 11 minutes meant the object was traveling at speeds that made their fastest ships look like they were standing still. The Empire's most advanced vessels could manage about 30 times the speed of light. This thing was moving at velocities that their computers couldn't even calculate properly. "Get me a visual," Thelvan ordered. The main screen shifted, showing the star-spotted darkness of space. At first there was nothing. Then the computer highlighted a tiny speck, enhancing and magnifying it. The object was small, sleek, and utterly foreign. Its hull seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making it look like a hole cut into reality itself. "Scan it." Full spectrum analysis. Corsal worked his console, and Thelvan watched the results populate across his screen. With each passing second, his confusion deepened into something approaching dread. No heat signature, despite the fact that moving at such speeds should have left a thermal trail visible from across the sector. No gravitational distortion, even though any ship with engines powerful enough to achieve those velocities should have been warping space around it. No subspace wake, no particle emissions, no quantum fluctuations. The sensors said there was something there. But they also said that something shouldn't exist. "Energy readings?" Thelvan pressed. "Negative, sir. Whatever it's using for power, it's not registering on any of our instruments." One of the younger officers, barely past her first cycle of service, spoke up with a trembling voice. "Sir, what if it's a weapon? Some kind of relativistic projectile? If something hit us at that speed?" "It's under intelligent control," Corsal interrupted, pulling up a trajectory map. "Look at this. 3 course corrections in the last hour. One of them was a 90-degree turn. Sir, at those speeds, the inertial forces alone should have turned whatever's inside into a thin paste against the hull walls." Thelvan stared at the display. A 90-degree turn at near relativistic speeds. The mathematics alone made his head hurt. The g-forces involved would be astronomical, enough to liquefy organic matter and crumple reinforced metal like paper. Yet the object had executed the maneuver smoothly, as if physics were merely a suggestion it chose to ignore. "Contact the High Council," he said quietly. "Priority 1 alert. Tell them we have an unidentified vessel in Imperial space using technology we've never encountered before." As Corsal sent the message, Thelvan continued studying the object. The Empire had ruled this region of space for 12,000 cycles. 12,000 cycles of expansion, conquest, and consolidation. They'd encountered 47 different alien species. They'd cataloged technologies ranging from primitive chemical rockets to advanced antimatter drives. Their databases contained the sum total of knowledge from dozens of civilizations. And yet this single small ship made all of that feel inadequate. The response from the High Council came faster than expected. The message was brief and direct: intercept and investigate. Battle Group 7 was already being mobilized, 32 warships, including 5 heavy cruisers and 2 dreadnoughts. More than enough firepower to handle any threat the Empire had ever encountered. Thelvan issued the orders, watching as his fleet began moving into an intercept pattern. The mysterious object continued on its path, seemingly unaware or unconcerned that it was being surrounded by enough military might to conquer a small star system. Then it stopped. Not slowed down gradually. Not decelerated over time. It simply went from impossible speeds to dead stop in an instant, hovering in the void like it was waiting for something. Or someone. "Deploy probe Delta 7, Thelvan commanded. "I want a close-range scan. Keep weapons ready but not locked. We don't know what we're dealing with here." The probe launched, a small automated device packed with every sensor the Empire had developed over millennia. It approached the mysterious vessel slowly, cautiously, transmitting data back every microsecond. When the results came in, Thelvan felt his blood turn cold. The object was definitely a ship. Approximately 30 meters in length, compact and efficient. Its hull was composed of materials that didn't match anything in the Imperial database, elements and alloys that their scientists had never seen before. The structure itself seemed impossibly dense, as if matter had been compressed and arranged in ways that shouldn't be stable. "Attempt communication," Thelvan ordered. "All frequencies. Standard first contact protocols." His communications officer cycled through every known transmission method. Radio waves, laser pulses, subspace signals, even ancient electromagnetic methods. They broadcast greetings in 47 languages, from the clicking dialect of the Vreth to the harmonic resonances of the Kelthani. Nothing. Complete silence from the mysterious ship. Then every screen on the bridge lit up simultaneously. Every computer system, every display, every holographic projector. Text appeared, written in perfect Valtrian script, bypassing every firewall, every encryption protocol, every security measure the Empire had spent centuries developing. The message was simple, almost friendly. "Hello. Do you need assistance?" Thelvan stared at the words, his mind racing. Whatever was in that ship had just demonstrated technological superiority that dwarfed anything the Empire possessed. It had infiltrated their most secure systems like they were children's toys. And it was asking if they needed help. He looked at Corsell, who looked back with the same expression of dawning realization. They hadn't found a threat. They'd found something far more dangerous than that. They'd found something that made the mighty Valtrian Empire look primitive. Commander Thelvan stared at the message glowing on every screen around him. His crew sat frozen, hands hovering over their consoles, waiting for orders that he wasn't sure how to give. In his 4 decades of military service, he'd followed protocols for everything from asteroid collisions to full-scale invasions. But there was no protocol for this. "Respond," he finally said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Standard identification request. Demand they identify themselves, their point of origin, and their purpose in Imperial space." The communications officer typed frantically, sending the message through their standard channels. For a moment nothing happened. Then the screens flickered again and new text appeared. But this time, it didn't just show up on the communications display. It appeared everywhere at once. On navigation screens, weapons targeting systems, even on the personal data pads that some crew members kept in their pockets. The message bypassed every security layer they had as easily as walking through an open door. "Oh, sorry about that. Didn't mean to startle anyone. I'm Jack Morrison, independent cargo hauler registered out of Earth. I was running some tests on my engine modifications and honestly didn't realize this area was claimed territory. You folks don't have any navigation beacons or border markers out here, so I just assumed it was open space. My bad." Thelvan read the message 3 times. The casual tone was almost insulting given the circumstances. This Jack Morrison, had just demonstrated technology that made the Empire's most advanced systems look like stone tools, and he was apologizing for a navigation error like he'd taken a wrong turn on a pleasure cruise. "Earth," Corsell muttered, already searching their databases. "Never heard of it. Computer shows no match in any Imperial records. No species, no planet, no star system with that designation." "Transmit again," Thelvan ordered. "Tell them to provide precise origin coordinates and prepare for boarding inspection. Use Regulation 7 protocol." Regulation 7 was the Empire's standard procedure for unknown vessels in Imperial space. It had been developed over thousands of cycles and refined through contact with dozens of alien species. It was firm but diplomatic, assertive but not aggressive. It had worked every single time. Until now. The response came within seconds. "Coordinates attached. Should be in the data packet I just sent. As for the boarding inspection thing, I'd rather not, if that's okay? Nothing personal, but I don't really know you folks yet, and my insurance specifically says not to let unauthorized personnel on board. Company policy, you understand. Happy to answer any questions though." Thelvan felt his jaw tighten. He pulled up the coordinates that had been transmitted. They pointed to a region in the outer spiral arm, an area the Empire had surveyed exactly once about 6,000 cycles ago. The scouts had reported nothing of interest. A few unremarkable star systems, some basic minerals, no signs of intelligent life. It had been categorized as low-priority frontier space, not worth the resources to claim or develop. Apparently, that assessment had been very, very wrong. "Sir," one of the tactical officers called out, "Captain Velmar from the destroyer Swift Retribution is requesting permission to fire a warning shot. He says the alien is not complying with lawful orders." Thelvan's mind raced. A warning shot was standard procedure, a way to demonstrate that they were serious. But something about this situation felt wrong. That ship had technology so far beyond their own that it might as well be magic. What would a warning shot even accomplish? Before he could respond, Corsal spoke up urgently. "Sir, Swift Retribution is firing without authorization." On the tactical display, Thelvan watched as a plasma beam lanced out from the destroyer, cutting through space toward the small human vessel. It was a textbook warning shot, close enough to demonstrate intent, far enough to avoid actual damage. Except the beam never reached its target. 10 meters from the human ship, the plasma bolt simply stopped. It hung in space, frozen like someone had pressed a pause button on reality itself. The superheated gas that should have been expanding and dissipating just floated there, unmoving, glowing like a small red star. Every alarm on the bridge started screaming at once. Energy readings spiked across the board. The science officer's console lit up with warnings about impossible physics and spatial anomalies. And then, slowly, the frozen plasma bolt began to fade, its energy bleeding away into nothing until it vanished completely. A new message appeared on their screens. "Okay, that was pretty hostile. Look, I really don't want any trouble here. I'm just a cargo hauler trying to make a living. I'll get out of your hair, air tendrils, and head home. Sorry again for the confusion. All ships activate tractor beams." Thelvan barked, his decision made in an instant. Do not let that vessel leave Imperial space. Around the mysterious ship, 6 different tractor beams activated simultaneously, each one capable of holding a vessel 100 times its size. The beams locked on, their gravitational fields converging on a single point. For a fraction of a second, the sensors showed a successful capture. Then the human ship moved. It didn't break free of the tractor beams. It didn't overpower them or shut them down. It simply went from stationary to moving as if the beams weren't even there. The sensors showed the tractor field still active, still locked on target, still pouring gravitational force into the space where the ship had been. But the ship itself was already gone, accelerating away at speeds that made their previous readings look slow by comparison. "Pursuit course," Thelvan commanded. "All ships, maximum speed. Deploy spatial anchors and gravity wells." Battle Group 7 gave chase, and Thelvan watched his tactical display fill with more and more ship icons as additional Imperial vessels joined the pursuit. Within the hour, they had over 50 warships in a coordinated net, using every containment technology the Empire had ever developed. Dimensional locks that should freeze ships in place, gravity wells that should trap vessels in artificial stellar masses, quantum anchors that should prevent faster-than-light travel entirely. The human ship flew through all of it like it wasn't there. More messages kept appearing on their systems, and each one made Thelvan grind his teeth harder. "Wow, you guys are persistent," followed by, "Hey, there's a really cool nebula at coordinates 447 to 229 if you want to check it out while you're in the area," and then, incredibly, "Do you folks have coffee in space? I've been out here for 6 hours and I'm running low. That's going to be a problem." Coffee. The being was worried about coffee while evading the full might of the Imperial fleet. Coral pulled up long-range scans of the coordinates the human had provided earlier. What he saw made him go very still. "Commander, you need to see this." The display showed a star system packed with activity. Thousands of energy signatures, all moving at velocities similar to the ship they were chasing. Massive orbital structures. Radio transmissions and unfamiliar frequencies. Industrial activity on a scale that matched some of the Empire's most developed core worlds. And they'd been there the whole time, quietly existing in a region the Empire had dismissed as worthless frontier space. "Get me a direct channel to the High Council," Thelvan said quietly. "Priority Alpha. Tell them we haven't found a rogue ship. We've found a civilization. One that's been watching us without us ever knowing they existed." As the fleet continued its futile chase, a final message appeared on Thelvan's personal screen. It was addressed to him specifically, which meant the human had identified the command structure of the entire battle group. "Commander Thelvan, I appreciate your dedication to your job, but this is getting silly. How about we talk this out? I'll stop at my home system boundary and wait for you there. Bring whoever you need. I promise I come in peace. Really? Scout's honor. Thelvan stared at the message for a long moment. Then he gave the order that would change everything. All ships stand down weapons. Maintain pursuit course but prepare for diplomatic contact. And someone get me every first contact specialist we have. We're not chasing an intruder anymore. What are we chasing, sir? Asked the young ensign. Thelvan looked at the retreating dot on his display, at the impossible ship that had made the Empire's finest technology look like children's toys. I don't know, he admitted. But I think we're about to find out if the Empire is really as powerful as we've always believed. The human ship stopped exactly where Jack Morrison had promised it would, right at the edge of a star system that Imperial maps had labeled as uninhabited frontier space. Battle Group 7, now swollen to 45 capital ships with more arriving every hour, formed a perimeter around the tiny vessel. To Commander Thelvan, it felt less like they were containing a threat and more like they were putting on a show of force that impressed absolutely no one. Sir, we're receiving another transmission, the communications officer announced. Thelvan nodded, and the message appeared on his screen. All right, I'm here as promised. I know you probably want to do this whole formal thing with security and protocols, so here's what I'm thinking. I'll take my shuttle over to your flagship. Just me, unarmed, totally peaceful. We can sit down, have a conversation like civilized beings, and figure out this whole misunderstanding. Sound good? Before Thelvan could respond, his security chief was already protesting. Commander, this could be a trap. We should demand the human come in their main vessel so we can scan it properly. Or better yet, we board their ship on our terms. Thelvan remembered the frozen plasma bolt and the useless tractor beams. If they wanted to harm us, I don't think they need to use tricks. Accept their offer. Prepare the main docking bay but keep weapons ready. Not aimed, just ready. 20 minutes later, a small shuttle detached from the human vessel. It was barely larger than an escape pod, and their sensors showed it had even less shielding than the main ship, which was to say none that they could detect. The shuttle docked with a gentle hiss of equalizing pressure, and Thelvan stood in the bay with an honor guard of 12 soldiers, all carrying plasma rifles. The door opened and Jack Morrison stepped out. Thelvan had seen many aliens in his career. He'd met species with 8 legs, species made of crystalline structures, species that communicated through color changes in their skin. He'd prepared himself for something unusual, perhaps something that would explain the incredible technology. Instead he saw a mammal. A simple, 2-legged, 2-armed mammal that looked almost disappointingly ordinary. The human stood roughly the same height as a Valtrian, covered in pale skin with a thatch of brown hair on top of his head. He wore strange clothing, something the translator identified as canvas pants and a flannel shirt, and carried a flat rectangular device under one arm. Over his shoulder hung a bag that clinked softly as he walked. Jack Morrison smiled, showing white teeth, and raised one hand in what was apparently a greeting gesture. Hey there. Thanks for agreeing to meet. I really am sorry about all this chaos. The translator on Thelvan's collar worked frantically, converting the human sounds into something he could understand. The voice it produced was warm, friendly, and completely at odds with the military tension filling the room. You will follow me to the conference chamber, Thelvan said formally. Any aggressive action will be met with immediate force. Understood, Commander. Lead the way. They walked through the corridors of the flagship, and Thelvan noticed Jack Morrison looking around with obvious curiosity. The human stopped at an observation window, gazing at the assembled fleet with what seemed like genuine appreciation. Wow, these ships are beautiful, Jack said. That design architecture is incredible. Is that a plasma distribution network running along the hull? The engineering must be crazy complex. One of the guards, unable to help herself, responded. The Empire's vessels represent 12,000 cycles of refined technology. 12,000 years? Jack whistled, which the translator rendered as an expression of impressed surprise. That's amazing. Humans have only been in space for about 400 years. We're still figuring stuff out. The conference room was designed to intimidate. A long table made of polished stone sat beneath lights that could be adjusted to make visitors uncomfortable. Thelvan had brought his senior staff, plus 3 scientists, 2 military strategists, and a xenopsychology specialist who was supposed to analyze the human's behavior. Jack Morrison sat down, placed his device on the table, and pulled a cylindrical container from his bag. He twisted off the top and took a drink, and the aroma that filled the room was strange and oddly pleasant. Sorry, it's been a long day, Jack said. This is coffee. It's basically a liquid stimulant we make from ground-up plant seeds. Want some? I've got extra cups. The xenopsychologist made a note, Subject displays no signs of stress or deception. Either extremely confident or genuinely believes they're in no danger. Thelvan decided to take control of the conversation. You claim to be from Earth. Our records show no such place. Explain. Jack pulled up a display on his device, and a holographic star map appeared above the table. It showed the galaxy from a perspective the Valtrians recognized, but with different markers and notations. A small section near the outer rim glowed brighter. This is Sol System, what we call home. Third planet from the star. You folks surveyed the area about 6,000 years ago according to your calendar, but at that time humans were still banging rocks together and living in caves. We didn't develop radio technology until about 200 years ago, and faster-than-light travel about 200 years after that. One of the Valtrian scientists leaned forward. That's impossible. The mathematical principles underlying FTL travel require centuries of theoretical work. The engineering alone took us about 50 years. Once Dr. Rebecca Watson published her unified field theory in 2187, Jack interrupted, pulling up another file. Here, I've got her original papers if you want to see them. Fair warning though, the math gets pretty dense. The hologram shifted, showing pages of equations and diagrams. The Valtrian scientists stared, their pupils dilating as they recognized some principles and found others completely foreign. One of them reached out, manipulating the hologram to examine a specific formula. This doesn't follow conventional quantum mechanics, she breathed. This is treating spacetime as if it's fluid? Malleable? But that would mean. Yeah, that's basically it, Jack said cheerfully. Once we figured out that space isn't really a rigid thing, more like really thick water, we could start poking holes in it. The first FTL ship was called Horizon. Small thing, barely made it to Alpha Centauri without falling apart, but it worked. He pulled up more files, and suddenly the table was surrounded by floating documents. Scientific papers, engineering blueprints, test results, historical records. It was all there, freely displayed with no encryption or security measures. You're just showing us this? Corsal asked, incredulous. Your most advanced technology? Without any conditions. Jack looked confused. Why wouldn't I? Science belongs to everyone. That's kind of humanity's whole philosophy. We share what we learn so everyone can build on it. How else would we make progress? The room fell silent. The concept was so alien to the Valtrians that several of them literally couldn't process it. The Empire's entire structure was built on controlling technology, on keeping the most advanced systems in the hands of those in power. Subject species were given only what they needed, and even then it was carefully monitored. Thelvan asked the question that had been burning in his mind since this all started. How many ships does Earth have? Jack scratched his head, thinking. Registered vessels? About 40 million, give or take. Most of them are cargo haulers like mine or passenger ships, exploration vessels, that kind of thing. Maybe 10,000 are specifically military, but even those are mainly for system defense. We've got a few deep space patrol ships, but we've never actually fought anyone, so honestly, I'm not sure how effective they'd be in a real battle. 40 million ships. The number hung in the air like a physical weight. The Empire had 1 billion vessels, true, but most of those were transports, civilian craft, and outdated patrol boats. Their actual military fleet numbered around 50 million, and most of those used technology that was, Thelvan was beginning to realize, potentially obsolete. And all of them can do what your ship does? Asked one of the military strategists, his voice barely a whisper. Well, mine's custom, Jack admitted. I like to tinker. But yeah, pretty much any human ship can outrun your fleet. It's just how our engines work. Different physics, different approach. The military strategist looked at Thelvan with an expression that said everything. They'd been chasing one civilian cargo hauler with 50 warships and hadn't come close to catching him. What would happen if Earth's actual military showed up? Jack took another sip of his coffee and leaned back in his chair. Look, I know this is a lot to process. But here's the thing, humans don't want conflict. We're scientists, traders, explorers. We've been watching your empire for about 30 years now, learning your languages, studying your culture. We chose not to make contact because, honestly, we're still kind of a mess sometimes. We wanted to get our act together first. You've been watching us for 30 years? Thelvan felt cold. How? Observation posts, long-range sensors, some stealth probes. Nothing invasive, just listening to public broadcasts and watching ship movements. We're curious by nature. Jack smiled apologetically. Today wasn't supposed to be first contact. I genuinely was just testing my engines and didn't realize I'd crossed into your space. But since we're here now, maybe it's time we formally introduce ourselves. One of the scientists finally found her voice. Your technology, your science, you said you built it all yourselves? No precursor civilization? No ancient discoveries? Nope, all us. Started with Newton and Einstein, built from there. Humans are really good at asking, what if, and then testing the answer. Sometimes we blow stuff up in the process, but that's how we learn. Thelvan looked around the table at his officers and scientists. Every single one of them wore the same expression, a mixture of awe, fear, and the dawning realization that the galaxy was far bigger and stranger than they'd ever imagined. What do your people want? Thelvan asked finally. Jack Morrison's smile widened. To talk. To trade. To learn from you and share what we know. To maybe make some friends out here in the big dark. The universe is a lonely place, Commander. Why face it alone? And in that moment, Thelvan understood that everything was about to change. The Emperor's throne room had witnessed 12,000 cycles of history. Conquests had been planned here, treaties signed, entire civilizations brought to heel under imperial rule. But never had it seen a debate quite like this one. Emperor Velthon sat motionless on his crystalline seat, his ancient eyes fixed on the holographic display floating before the assembled High Council. It showed Jack Morrison's ship, that tiny impossible vessel, surrounded by the might of Battle Group 7. A single human cargo hauler had made the Empire's finest military force look like children chasing shadows. We must strike now, War Minister Krelvan insisted, his voice echoing through the chamber. While we still have numerical superiority. 40 million human vessels against our billion. The mathematics favor us. The mathematics, Chief Scientist Tilwan countered sharply, are meaningless if we cannot hit what we aim at. Did you watch the recordings? Our weapons pass through defensive fields we cannot even detect. Our tractor beams gripped nothing. One civilian trader evaded 50 warships for 6 hours without breaking a sweat. What happens when we face ships actually designed for combat? Then we overwhelm them with numbers. Krelvan slammed his appendage on the table. Launch everything we have. Saturate their space with so much firepower that their defenses, whatever they are, cannot possibly. And kill how many of our own people in the process? Commander Thelvan interrupted. He stood before the council, still wearing his field uniform, having been summoned directly from his flagship. I spoke with the human. Face to face. He offered us their scientific database. Freely. No conditions. No demands. Just shared it because, and I quote, science belongs to everyone. The council chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. The concept was so fundamentally opposed to imperial philosophy that many couldn't even process it. It's a trick, Krelvan spat. Obvious espionage. They give us corrupted data, we implement it, our systems fail. Our scientists have been analyzing it for 6 hours, Tilwan cut in, pulling up her own display. It's real. All of it. Mathematical proofs we've never considered. Engineering principles that make our technology look crude. And it's all freely published in their databases, available to anyone who wants to learn. Their entire civilization operates on open information sharing. She highlighted a section of equations, and even those council members without scientific training could see the elegance in the formulas. This is how they achieve faster-than-light travel. Not through brute force dimensional tearing like we do, but by treating spacetime as a manipulable medium. It's brilliant. It's revolutionary. And they developed it in 50 years. 50 years. The Emperor spoke for the first time, his voice ancient and measured. We've had FTL technology for 8,000 cycles, inherited from the species we absorbed. In all that time, we've made incremental improvements. These humans built theirs from nothing in 50 years. Less than nothing, Your Majesty, Thelvan added. 400 years ago they were using chemical rockets. Controlled explosions to push tiny capsules into orbit around their planet. Now they have 40 million interstellar vessels. The War Minister wasn't giving up. Which makes them dangerous. Your Majesty, if we don't act now, in another 400 years, they could have 400 million ships. Or 4 billion. We must eliminate this threat while we can still pretend we're capable of eliminating them? The Emperor's words cut through the room like a blade. War Minister, you speak of threats. Let me tell you what I see. I see a species that has been watching us for 30 years without us knowing. Watching us. Learning our languages. Studying our movements. And we never detected them. Not once. The implications settled over the council like a heavy blanket. If humans had wanted to attack, they could have done so at any time. The Empire's supposedly impregnable borders were apparently wide open to anyone with the right technology. What are you suggesting, Your Majesty? asked the economic minister, who had been silent until now. I'm suggesting, the emperor said slowly, that we have two choices. We can fight a war we might not win against an enemy that doesn't want to be our enemy. Or we can adapt. He gestured, and the display changed to show the coordinates of Earth's star system. They call it Sol. A medium yellow star with 8 planets. Their homeworld, Earth, has a population of 11 billion. That's just one planet. Our entire empire spans 200 worlds with a combined population of 40 billion. We outnumber them 4 to 1, yet I suspect that means nothing. Your Majesty, you cannot be considering, Krelvan started. I'm considering survival, the Emperor snapped, showing a flash of the authority that had kept him in power for 6 centuries. Commander Thelvan, what was your assessment of the human you met? Thelvan chose his words carefully. Honest, Your Majesty. Almost disarmingly so. He seemed genuinely apologetic about the situation. He answered every question we asked, showed us technology that could reshape our civilization, and asked for nothing in return except conversation. Either humans are the most sophisticated deceivers I've ever encountered, or they genuinely want peaceful relations. Or they're so powerful they don't fear us learning their secrets, Tilwyn added. Your Majesty, with your permission, I'd like to show the council something. At the Emperor's nod, she pulled up a new display. It showed a complex simulation, ships moving through space in patterns that made the military officers lean forward with interest. This is a tactical analysis based on what we observed from one human ship. If we assume their military vessels have similar capabilities, and we engage them in open battle, our projections show a 67% probability of catastrophic Imperial losses within the first day. By the third day, that rises to 92%. And that's assuming they don't have weapon systems more advanced than their civilian shielding, which seems unlikely. The silence that followed was absolute. However, Tilwyn continued, if we pursue peaceful contact, we gain access to their technology, their methods, their scientific approach. Our preliminary analysis suggests that adopting even basic human principles could advance our civilization by centuries within a single generation. The economic minister stirred. There's another consideration. We've already received reports from 3 subject worlds. They've intercepted human radio broadcasts. They've seen the data that Jack Morrison shared. They're asking questions. What kind of questions? The Emperor asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Why the Empire hasn't innovated in millennia. Why we hoard technology instead of sharing it. If these young humans can achieve such advancement through cooperation and open knowledge, why do we maintain rule through control and restriction? There it was. The real threat. Not human weapons but human ideas. The concept that progress came from freedom, that innovation required questioning, that advancement meant sharing rather than hoarding. Ideas like that could unravel 12,000 cycles of imperial structure. So we face a choice, the Emperor said quietly. Fight a war that could destroy us or accept change that could transform us. War Minister, I respect your concerns. But tell me, can you guarantee victory against Earth? Krelvan was silent for a long moment. Finally he said, No, Your Majesty. I cannot. Then we negotiate. We establish formal relations. We trade, we learn, we adapt. And perhaps, the Emperor's eyes swept across his council, we discover that power doesn't only come from domination. Perhaps these humans can teach us something we forgot long ago. He stood, his ancient frame straightening with renewed purpose. Draft a treaty proposal. Mutual non-aggression. Open trade. Cultural exchange. And someone tell Jack Morrison that the Valtrian Empire would be honored to establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth. As the council dispersed to carry out their emperor's will, Tilwyn approached Thelvan. You really think they're genuine? The humans. Thelvan thought about Jack Morrison sitting in the conference room, drinking his coffee, freely sharing centuries of scientific progress with strangers who'd been shooting at him hours before. I think they're exactly what they appear to be. And that's what terrifies me. They're not conquerors or saints. They're just explorers who got really good at asking questions and refused to accept that anything was impossible. That might be the most dangerous thing of all, Tilwyn said softly. Question everything long enough, and eventually you question why anyone should rule over anyone else. Yes, Thelvan agreed, looking out at the stars. I suspect the Empire is about to discover what real change looks like. Across the galaxy, in a small cargo ship at the edge of Sol System, Jack Morrison received a formal message from the Valtrian Emperor. He read it twice, grinned, and immediately sent a communication back to Earth. Hey everyone, guess what? We just made first contact with the Galactic Empire. They seem pretty cool. Sending coordinates now. We're going to need diplomats, scientists, and probably someone who can explain human culture without making us sound completely insane. Oh, and bring coffee. Lots of coffee. I'm almost out and I think these folks are going to love it. He leaned back in his pilot chair, looked at the assembled alien warships that had stopped pointing weapons at him, and thought about how his simple engine test had accidentally changed the course of galactic history. Mom was right, he said to the empty cockpit. I really should have checked my navigation charts more carefully. Retried. 6 months after Jack Morrison accidentally stumbled into Imperial space, the galaxy looked very different. Commander Thelvan stood at the observation deck of the newly established Joint Diplomatic Station, watching human cargo ships move freely through what used to be restricted Imperial territory. Each vessel flew past Valtrian warships without hesitation, and the warships no longer tracked them as potential threats. It had been the fastest transformation in Imperial history, and not everyone was happy about it. They're everywhere now, muttered Captain Corsal, standing beside him. Human traders in our markets, human scientists in our laboratories, human music playing in our city centers. 6 months ago we'd never heard of them. Now they're reshaping our entire civilization. Thelvan understood his old friend's unease. Change on this scale was frightening, especially for a species that had spent 12,000 cycles believing they were the pinnacle of galactic achievement. But he'd also seen what that change was bringing. Come with me, he said. I want to show you something. They walked through the station's corridors until they reached Laboratory 7. Through the transparent walls, they could see a mixed group of researchers. 3 Valtrians, 2 humans, and representatives from 4 other species that had once been subject worlds of the Empire. They were gathered around a holographic display, arguing animatedly about equations that scrolled past faster than Thelvan could read. That's Dr. Helen Foster. Thelvan pointed to a human woman with gray hair pulled back in a practical style. Astrophysicist from Earth. Next to her is Research Director Keelven, one of our finest minds. 3 months ago they'd never met. Last week, they published a joint paper that's already being called the biggest breakthrough in energy generation in 3,000 cycles. One paper doesn't, Corsal started. It's not one paper. It's 17. Across 6 different fields. All in the last 4 months. All collaborations between human and non-human scientists. The humans don't just have advanced technology, old friend. They have a completely different way of thinking about problems. They question everything, even their own assumptions. Especially their own assumptions. Through the window, they watched as Dr. Foster drew something on a display, then immediately erased it when one of the alien scientists pointed out a flaw. She laughed, actually laughed, at her own mistake, then started working on a new approach. In the old imperial system, admitting error was seen as weakness. Here it was just part of the process. The treaty changed everything, Thelvan continued. Open trade means human goods in our markets. Cultural exchange means our children are learning human languages in school. And the worst part for people who like the old ways? It's working. Our economy has grown more in 6 months than in the previous 60 years. Corsal's expression remained troubled. But at what cost? The subject worlds are demanding more autonomy. Some are even suggesting they should be equal partners in the Empire rather than conquered territories. There are protests on 14 worlds. The old order is collapsing. Good, Thelvan said simply. It was built on a lie, that we were superior, that might made us worthy to rule. The humans showed up and proved that innovation matters more than domination. Maybe it's time we learned that lesson. They moved on to the diplomatic wing, where the real transformation was visible. The Embassy of Earth took up an entire section of the station, and it was unlike any diplomatic mission Thelvan had ever seen. The walls were covered with art from Earth. Paintings, photographs, digital displays showing everything from towering cities to pristine forests. Music drifted from open doorways, styles that ranged from soothing to energetic. And everywhere there were people talking. Jack Morrison had become Earth's unofficial ambassador, mostly because he'd been the first to make contact and everyone seemed to like him. He stood in the main reception area now, dressed in what he called business casual, slacks and a button-up shirt that was still somehow more relaxed than formal Valtrian attire. He was talking with a group of visitors from a species called the Thren, who had been conquered by the Empire 4,000 cycles ago. The key is asking why at least 5 times, Jack was explaining, demonstrating with his hands. You think you know the problem, you ask why it's happening. You get an answer, you ask why that's happening. Keep going until you hit the root cause. Humans call it the 5 whys technique. Super simple, but it works. One of the Thren, a young female whose translator identified her as an engineer, looked amazed. We're allowed to question our supervisors that many times? Question everyone, Jack said with a grin. Question me, question your leaders, question the universe itself. That's how progress happens. Nobody has all the answers, so we work together to find them. Thelvan watched the Thren's expression transform. It was the look of someone who just realized that the limitations they'd accepted their entire life weren't actually real. He'd seen that expression a lot lately, on faces from dozens of different species. Ambassador Morrison, Thelvan called out, using the formal title that Jack still insisted was way too fancy for a cargo hauler. Commander. Hey, come join us. I was just about to show everyone pictures of Earth. You want to see? I've got this great shot of the Grand Canyon that'll blow your mind. They gathered around as Jack pulled up images on a portable display. The humans' homeworld was shockingly diverse. Vast oceans, towering mountains, frozen poles, and dense forests. Cities that sprawled for kilometers, glittering with lights. And everywhere, humans engaged in countless different activities. That's Tokyo, Jack said, pointing to an image of a massive city. About 37 million people in the metropolitan area. And that's New York, Rio de Janeiro, Cairo, Mumbai. We've got thousands of cities, hundreds of different cultures, over 7,000 languages. Humans have been arguing with each other for our entire history, but we learned that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. You fight among yourselves? Asked one of the Thren. Used to a lot. Still disagree about plenty of things. But we figured out that we can compete in ideas without killing each other over them. Turns out the best way to win an argument is to prove your point works better than the other person's. Science, democracy, open markets. They're all ways of letting ideas compete peacefully. A soft chime interrupted the conversation. Thelvan's communicator showed an urgent message from Imperial Command. His expression must have changed because Jack immediately picked up on it. Problem? The human asked quietly. The conservative faction. They're planning something. There's been a lot of resistance to the changes. Jack nodded slowly. Yeah, we figured that would happen. Change is scary, especially for people who benefited from the old system. What are they planning? Unknown. But there's talk of a military demonstration. Some of the old guard admirals want to reassert imperial dominance. They think if they can show strength, they can reverse the treaty. Can they? Thelvan thought about the question. 6 months ago, maybe. But now. Come with me. There's something you need to see. They took a transport to the observation deck on the station's highest level. From here they could see dozens of ships coming and going. But it wasn't the human vessels that Thelvan pointed to. Was the others? Those are Thren ships. He indicated a cluster of sleek vessels. And those are Kelthani and Vreth and half a dozen other species. 3 months ago they were using technology the Empire gave them, limited by design, easy to control. Now look at what they're flying. The ships were different. Modified. Enhanced with principles learned from humans or developed through collaboration with human scientists. They were faster, more efficient, more advanced than anything the Empire had authorized. The subject worlds aren't subject anymore, Thelvan continued. Not really. They have access to the same knowledge humans shared. They're building, learning, questioning. If the conservatives try to reassert control by force, they won't just be fighting humans. They'll be fighting everyone who's tasted freedom and doesn't want to give it back. Jack was quiet for a moment watching the ships. What do you think will happen? I think, Thelvan said carefully, that the Empire as we knew it is already gone. The question now is what replaces it. A new tyranny that tries to suppress all this progress? Or something better? And which side are you on, Commander? Thelvan looked at the human who'd accidentally changed everything. Jack Morrison, the cargo hauler who'd been testing engine modifications and stumbled into history. He thought about Dr. Foster collaborating with Valtrian scientists. About Thren engineers asking why 5 times. About his own grandchildren coming home from school excited about human music and human literature and human ideas about democracy. 6 months ago, I would have defended the Empire without question, he admitted. Now, I've seen what's possible when people work together instead of under domination. I've watched our scientists make more progress in months than in centuries. I've seen subject species become partners. So I suppose I'm on the side of whatever comes next as long as it's better than what we had. Jack smiled and extended his hand in the human gesture of agreement. Thelvan clasped it, still finding the custom strange but understanding its meaning. For what it's worth, Jack said, humans don't want to rule anyone. We just want to be part of the galactic community. Trade partners, scientific collaborators, maybe friends if we're lucky. The galaxy's a big, weird, wonderful place. Seems like a shame not to explore it together. Below them, a human cargo ship docked next to a Valtrian cruiser. The crews would mingle, share stories, maybe trade goods or information. It was becoming normal, this cooperation between species that had been strangers 6 months ago. Thelvan's communicator chimed again. This time the message was different. The Emperor himself had made an announcement. The Empire was being restructured into a galactic coalition. Subject worlds would become member states. Military forces would be reduced in favor of mutual defense pacts. And humans would be offered a seat on the new High Council as equal partners. The old order was dead. Something new was being born. You changed the galaxy, Thelvan said to Jack. One accidental border crossing, and 12,000 cycles of history redirected. Jack laughed, that easy human sound that seemed to make everything less serious. Hey, I was just testing my engines. You folks did the hard part, you chose to change. That takes courage. They stood together, human and Valtrian, watching ships from a dozen different worlds move through space that used to be divided by conquest. Somewhere out there, more species were learning about Earth, about humans, about the possibility that the galaxy could be something other than empires and subjects. The future was uncertain. There would be resistance, conflict, growing pains as thousands of worlds learned to cooperate instead of compete. But for the first time in 12,000 cycles, the galaxy had a choice about what it wanted to become. And it had all started because one cargo hauler asked a simple question. What if my engines could go faster? Sometimes, Thelvan reflected, the most revolutionary act was simply refusing to accept that things had to stay the way they'd always been. Come on, Jack said, heading toward the door. I'm supposed to meet with some Kelthani traders in an hour, and I promised I'd bring coffee. You should join us. They're talking about establishing a joint shipping company, and honestly I could use someone who actually understands coalition, trade regulations. Thelvan followed, leaving behind the observation deck and the view of a galaxy that was learning to ask, what if, and why not, instead of simply accepting what had always been. The age of empires was ending. The age of questions had begun. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, more humans were out there, testing engines, asking questions, and dreaming about what might be possible. The galaxy would never be the same.